Hey everyone, it's Isaiah. Welcome, welcome. This is another one of the Isaiah's Inspiring Evenings podcast episodes. Today we are doing episode 2 of a series of episodes that I'm recording with Ree Pearson. Hi, Ree.
Hi.
And it's about exploring relationship red flags. It's a series of 9 episodes. If you've not listened to episode 1, you can go and find it. And this is episode 2. The idea is to discuss the early warning signs of unhealthy relationship dynamics, the psychology behind red flag behaviors, and how we can interrupt those patterns before they escalate into harm. These conversations happen live and then are shared in my podcast and anywhere else the guest feels like sharing. Before we go into too much conversation, let me remind you who Ree Pearson is. So Ree lives overlooking the sea and describes herself as being on the edge. A police officer for 27 years with focus on policy, and how the police deal with partner abuse. Ree specializes in domestic abuse, stalking, and safeguarding. Her post-policing career has continued with directorships with several community interest companies, all focused on those specialisms. Ree's book, Be Kind, No Excuses, is a guide for teenagers and parents to raise awareness of the red flag behaviors that are precursor to abusive behaviors in relationships. Her mission is to flip discussions on violence against women and girls and talk about the real problem, the majority of abuse, being perpetrated by men who are violent towards others, whether women, men, or children. Be Kind, No Excuses is now a community interest company, and Ree is also the co-creator of WOW, Women Only Wellness Ltd., which creates safe spaces for women and girls to come together and step into their own power through learning that self-care is not selfish. Now, this episode 2, we named Why Knowing These Red Flags is Crucial. And again, we are going to discuss about the maybe the most important thing that I learned with discussing with you, Ree, is that there is no such thing as an abusive relationship. So whenever you say something like that, or I say something like that, everybody stops in their tracks. What do you mean there is not an abusive relationships? So
No,
tell me.
a relationship is a construct. It
Mm,
is it describes a situation. You don't there is no such thing as abusive relationships. There are abusive people with whom we get into relationships. You do not get into a relationship that becomes abusive. You get into a relationship with somebody who is going to abuse you. And
mm,
what we're talking about is looking at the early start of a relationship where we can get some clues from that person who is going to abuse you in relation to how
mhm,
they behave towards you, how they behave towards your wider circle. So it's not a relationship that's abusive, it's a person that's abusive.
mm. Because a relationship involves two people, right? At least, or more. So the
Yeah,
relationship per
and
se.
in this context is it um we're talking about I would call them romantic relationships. I wouldn't say
Mm,
intimate relationships. The term for domestic abuse refers to intimate partner relationships. And the problem I have with that is the definition says 16 and over in the UK. I don't know what it is in other countries. In England and Wales, 16 and over. And I think in Scotland, it's 16 and over. Um, the problem with that is we know that teenagers get into romantic relationships. We also know that people who may be married and have children don't have an intimate relationship. There's an assumption that if you're living together as
mm,
a couple, it's an intimate relationship, not necessarily intimate in terms of intimacy and like sex and
hmm.
well intimacy. So I prefer the term romantic relationship.
Yeah,
Mind
that's
you,
that's
me and
that's
my
a really
me and my husband
interesting.
forget to be romantic. So we are, I'm married and I do have a romantic relationship, but I'm just thinking like not enough romance going on there, Ree. I need to do something about that.
But no, it's a really interesting distinction because indeed for so many teenagers, a romantic relationship does not immediately translate into an intimacy, aka sex. And still, the abuse can happen
Sure.
even without the intimacy. So, yeah, really
I think
interesting.
that I think where I am, the definition is related to the age of consent for legal consent for sex, which in
Mm,
England, Wales, and Scotland, in the UK is 16. In other
mm,
countries, it's different. But they've attached the definition, the criminalized definition of domestic abuse
mm,
to the age of consent for sex. And I can understand why they've done that. And that is why I don't want to necessarily change the definition,
mm.
because that would give us a slippery slope to reducing the age of consent for sex,
Yeah,
which
of
I think
course.
should be 25, not 16.
No, but I think that the number that you gave me, I don't know if it was in private or in the previous episode. You said something about how many girls, teenage girls, have already been in an abusive relationship or in a relationship with somebody abusive. Sorry,
Yeah,
let me
it's
correct
hard, isn't
myself.
it? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Uh,
20%. The Youth Endowment Fund is a charity here working with teenagers, and they did a really good piece of research at the back end of 24, and they spoke to 10,000
mm,
teenagers, 13 to 19-year-olds, and they didn't just say, "Have you been in a abusive relationship? Have you been a victim of domestic abuse?" What they said was, "Have you been a victim of emotional abuse? And this is what this looks like.
mm-hmm,
Have you been a victim of psychological abuse? And this is what this looks like." They
mm-hmm,
asked
mm-hmm.
the questions in depth. And yes, 20% of people who
Yeah, and I'm guessing
are
those
at school,
20% are not all over 16. So,
no,
indeed, disconnecting the intimacy questions from
yeah,
the abuse question is a really interesting construct. Well, again, we have to rethink how we imagine
yeah,
things. It's not,
yeah,
domestic abuse is let me be blunt and a little dumb here. It's not rape. Domestic abuse and rape are two completely different things.
yeah,
One might include the other, but it
yes,
doesn't have
it,
to
not
be.
necessarily. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And even without
What
intimacy, there can be abuse.
one of the interesting things we found was people, when people are asked the question, because they don't understand the definition, they will say, "Have you been a victim of domestic abuse?" And if they haven't been physically abused,
Mm,
hit,
hmm
punched, kicked, they will say no.
hmm
And one of the statistics that comes out here, which I always question, is a third of domestic abuse begins in pregnancy.
hmm
And I think that's not true, because I would put money on, if I sat that woman down who was pregnant and had started to experience what she defines as domestic abuse, and had a conversation about what her partner's behavior was like before the pregnancy, I would see abuse in that relationship.
mm,
But because the question is asked in such a way, they go, a third of domestic abuse
hmm
happens. And I think that's because it becomes physically violent, when it's always been there.
Yeah, and if we
But
talk about very young women,
yeah, but you're talking about a situation where you're in a relationship, you're having a baby, which is increases stress levels,
hmm
and changes dynamic of a relationship anyway. I
no,
don't know what you were. I had
there's
my
yeah, but I was old when I got my first kid. I mean, I wasn't close to teenagers at all. I was 20
no,
something, six
I
or
was
seven.
28.
Uh,
I was
mm,
28.
mm,
So yeah, but I still became this kind of tunnel visioned,
yeah,
hormonal, get away
yeah.
from my kid, like, you know what I mean? So there's all sorts going on in the relationship when you're having a baby together. So yes, tensions increase, financial tensions increase.
Mm,
So that can always create. But I think I like I say, I would put money on that
mm,
relationship hadn't been like a walk in the park beforehand, not recognizing the red flags at the beginning. So
mhm,
when people read the book, Be Kind, No Excuses, in the first story, there's a red flag almost immediately,
mm,
because this person is who this person is.
mhm,
They're not a different person for each partner.
mm,
They're the same person, and they go from partner to partner to partner. and those red flags are there. And actually, in that particular story, and I got wrong. My Auntie Margaret told me off for this, right? I said I would see if a man had sole custody of his child or children, I would see that as a red flag because I know that a lot of women will leave the children behind because that is, in that moment in time, the safest thing to do for the children.
Yeah.
And I said, that's
Mm.
a red flag. Now, that's a red flag because it is, but what you have to do is not just take that on face value. You have to say, why? Why? I know somebody in my family who got custody of his kids. I know why that happened, and I helped that happen.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it's not 100%
It's not,
guaranteed
but it is.
situation,
It is
but it is
when that
interesting to
relationship is
dig.
with an abusive person, that woman, and I have a friend who did this, left her teenage boys behind because it was the safest thing to do. And we see this all of the time post separation abuse.
Hmm.
And this is why we use these stories because we're trying to tell people look at what happened to these people down the line. It's a pattern. You can see this
Mm.
pattern. It's happened there, it's there, it's there. You're at the beginning of your relationship, romantic life.
Hmm.
Be aware because you're going to possibly be that woman down the line.
Yeah,
You're
and,
going to
and when
possibly,
you look at it the way we started this conversation, which is there is no abusive relationships, there are no abusive relationship, there's just abusive people, which means look at your romantic partner before you start having a baby with. Before
and
you
well, that's
start
what
getting married or or moving in together or and I think we've discussed that one of the basic red flags is the rapidity of the relationship. So
the speed.
obviously
Yeah,
the speed,
absolutely.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
So obviously this is where each of us need to kind of stop and check what's the situation before we commit too much into a relationship, whichever relationship it is, to
yeah,
check that who we are committing with.
yes, 100%. And also, I always get, like, could we say this, right? Be careful, don't go too fast. And then somebody will pop up and go, well, we moved in after 3 weeks and we've been married for 40 years. And I think, well, good for you. That is fantastic. But that is not the norm. That is
Mm.
very much an anomaly.
Yeah, but
And
that this kind of answer is just like, I'm going to be very aggressive here, not to you, but in general, when you say, "Oh, but I'm not racist. I have a black friend." Or
yeah,
somebody will pop up and say, "Oh, we have a black
yeah,
family
hanging
friend
out.
that we
Yeah,
actually love." It doesn't mean that it's the
no,
norm, right? So beware
it's
of
still
the,
racist.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, your
But that's
assessment
what
is
people
should
say.
be with me, my relationship, not comparing. Anyway, the comparison
Absolutely.
is
Yeah, yeah.
killing mostly
And
everything.
again, comparison is the thief of joy, but also there's no Olympic standard for domestic abuse. It's abuse.
Mm,
So women say, well, it was terrible, but it wasn't as bad as her, or at
mm,
least he didn't hit me. There's no Olympic standard. You don't get on a
mm,
podium
mm,
to get a bloody medal. It's
mm,
wrong. The end.
mm,
Let's do something about it. Let's have these conversations. Let's make sure that young people are aware that these behaviors are not acceptable and these behaviors need to be, I
mm,
wouldn't say, I wouldn't use the word challenged, but if you're a teen, it's different. Like I'm 60. If I was dating somebody and they did something wrong, I would immediately just go, oh, well,
yeah.
gone. But if I was 15, 15-year-old Ree wouldn't do that.
Mm, I know.
Well,
I know.
15-year-old Ree didn't do that.
No, 15-year-old
And it's,
Isaiah didn't do that either. I remember
yeah,
committing myself to a relationship that was really 100% shit. And really,
yeah,
there was
yeah,
nothing in it for me. Nothing in it for me. But I thought that it was better at the time. I thought it was better to be with someone than be alone,
yeah,
which is a
yeah, and
stupid reason to be with
yeah.
someone, right?
But there's a
Um,
culture, there's a culture around that as well. That's
yeah.
an interesting point because there is this culture on planet patriarchy where we get paired off,
Hmm.
don't we? And it's like, and this whole thing about women who aren't getting married. There's a whole thing in the press about
Hmm. Yeah.
women on
Hmm.
the birth rate is plummeting. And there's this push, especially in the States, for women to be married and have children. That is
Hmm.
your purpose as a woman. It's shit. That is
Hmm.
nonsense. And I got married at 19. I met this man at 18 and went through a whole thing and been married to him within a year. For me, my age now, I'm like, what the hell? So if that was my kid, I
Hmm.
would be like, over my dead body.
Hmm.
That's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and
But
this is partly,
back
I
in the
think,
80s,
partly because patriarchy, blah, 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 of course, but also historically, at some point, what would happen is because there was no way to not be pregnant, women would get pregnant as soon as. So that
yeah,
means marriage was a way of safety for them. This is not true anymore, ladies.
yeah,
Wake up.
yeah, yeah. Protect your ovaries, ladies.
Yeah, we don't
And
have to have babies.
also boys,
Um,
boys don't get somebody pregnant. You have to protect yourself too,
yeah.
because women can choose to get pregnant deliberately,
Mm.
and
This
you
was
have to
for me
protect
that
yourself.
that was I don't have daughters. I have two boys, but I was really really very insistent on the one thing you don't want, boys, is to have a baby while you're a teenager, whatever
And
the circumstance. You don't want it. That's it. You
yeah,
don't want to have to deal with the trauma, with the fact that did she do it on purpose? Did she not? If she didn't, poor girl, blah blah blah. The whole thing. Just avoid it. It's quite easy nowadays
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
avoid it.
yeah, yeah.
And when I hear of stories of women or very young women who say, "Oh, I didn't have a choice," well, then I think this is where we lack the education on what's a domestic abuse personality or person. I don't
Yeah.
want personality, but person.
I did look up the statistics last year on how many condoms are sold every day on this planet, and it's like millions, millions. And I was having a conversation with a group of teenage girls, and one of them was like, "Well, my boyfriend says he can't feel anything when he's using a condom," and I was like,
Hmm.
"He's lying to you.
Hmm. Yeah, and
He's
even if he
lying to you.
doesn't, fuck him. No,
Just
forget
yeah,
it.
give him, like just do blowjobs instead of having intercourse.
Hmm. Hmm.
Don't get
In
pregnant."
France now, I've seen recently that in most of music festivals, etc., etc., there's an abundance of free condoms being distributed, which I think is a good idea. But then we still have boys or young men or older men pretending that, oh, this won't work for me, and I'm like,
And then you have to be careful that they don't take it off.
hmm.
Yeah, yeah. But also, there's this whole thing where in the White House in the States, apparently, in the ladies' room, in the ladies' toilet across the White House. I don't know how big the White House is, but I assume it's an office block essentially. Women can buy condoms, but there are no condoms in the men's room. Rude.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
don't get pregnant. Don't get anybody pregnant. Don't let
That's
anybody get pregnant because you're not being careful.
mm.
And
And I think
because
that's
that's the
basically
scam.
about boundaries, right? At
Totally.
whatever age, it's about setting boundaries on what what do I want my life to look like in a year?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
think about that. Whatever you're considering entering a relationship, what do I want my life to look like in a year? And then do
That's a
we
really
agree on
good one,
that?
actually.
Do we
Yeah.
agree on that?
And have those conversations. Like people are having sex and they don't know what anybody's ambitions are, what anybody's, what their plan is for that. Most people put more energy into planning 2 weeks in the sun in the summer. For those of us who live at 55 degrees north, not you, obviously. Most people put more energy and planning into the 2 weeks they have off work once a year than they do into their entire life. And I
Yeah,
just find that like, wow,
yeah.
wow.
Mm.
So, yeah, plan, have those conversations. And parents as well, have
And
those conversations with your
yeah,
kids.
yeah.
Because the one thing with teenage pregnancies, I think the UK England has the highest teenage pregnancy rate in Europe, I think, or did have last time I had a look. Um, have the conversations because it's not teenage boys that are getting teenage girls pregnant. It is men.
Mm.
Men in their 20s, 30s, and sometimes their 40s, because um, older men um, don't date older men who have issues,
Mhm.
um, don't date women of the same age
Mm.
because women of their age would just tell them to fuck right off.
Yeah. Mm.
So they target younger women
Right. Mm.
and girls
Mm.
because they can. I mean, you've seen it. This
It's
whole crap
easier.
about. Well, it's easier,
It's
and
easier
they can
to
manipulate,
circum.
and she doesn't know any different.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, as a parent, we really have to make sure that we have those conversations, however awkward or difficult, or, oh my
Yeah,
God, I don't want to talk. And if the teenager doesn't want to speak about, my son's never wanted to talk about sex with me. He was like, no, no, no. And I said, okay, listen, you have a choice, me or your father, and that's it. you know and if you don't agree, you're going to have both of us on that.
yeah, yeah.
But and
It's
it wasn't comfortable for me. It wasn't, but I still felt like it was kind of my major job after they turned 13. Was that before that it was, teaching them how to tie their laces and the whole shit. But after
yeah,
they
ride a
turned
bike, stuff
12
like that.
or 11 or 12, it was like, okay, now we're talking about this, and we are, because you know this is going to shape your life, your
But
relationships, and your life.
for me, it was a safety issue,
Hmm?
and I didn't want my children to be put at risk because I was embarrassed about talking about
Yeah,
sex.
exactly. Exactly.
So I like you have to get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go on full on,
No.
a little conversation until you feel comfortable and then expand. You can't go from not talking about relationships to suddenly speaking and saying to a 15-year-old, sit down, I want to
Sit
talk to you
down.
about
Let's talk about your dick.
let's talk
Hmm?
about your
No.
dick. Like,
Or your
no,
vagina.
yeah, you
No, this
can't.
is not gonna.
You can't. And you have to do it gradually and carefully and appropriately to their age
Mhm.
as well.
Of
My kids,
course.
you think they were brought up on a farm, honestly, don't talk about anything.
But I think,
Because
the appropriately to the age thing is real for any is true, sorry, for any conversation that you can have with your kids. I
100%,
remember my
yeah,
kid, age 5, asking me about the solar system, and my answer was, as simple as a 5-year-old can understand. And then when he was 7, he asked again, and I produced a
mhm.
more complicated answer, and blah blah blah. He basically studied astrophysics to end up. So,
Oh,
he
well, you just knew
pursued
that
this
was going to happen. Then
interest.
trajectory.
He pursued this interest. But if I'd given him the information that he found in books when he was 18, because he was way over my head by that time,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and if I'd studied, given him that information when he was
yeah,
5, he would have, went completely over his head. It's the
yeah.
same, whatever is the situation, but it doesn't mean that we don't talk about it.
I think the job of
Uh,
the parent is to safeguard the child.
hmm?
What line?
Yeah,
And
and
I'll die on that one.
give them tools and information so that they can slowly safeguard themselves as they grow up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Mm.
make it so that they can come to you without fear of being shouted at.
Yeah,
But they're
of
going to
course.
make decisions that you're going to disagree with. But hell's bells,
As a
if my
parent,
parents
my
knew half
advice
of the
is talk
things,
to them in the car.
yeah,
Never,
yeah,
never
yeah.
sit them down at a table. Just
No,
while you're
no
driving,
like this. It has to
no
be
eye
like this.
contact, so,
Yeah,
you can talk to them in the car.
mhm,
Um,
definitely.
so that,
Yeah,
yeah, and then you reach your destination and the conversation ends. So it's going to be a short one, and then you can
yeah.
repeat.
Just be
Um,
that safe parent. Yeah, I agree.
yeah. Mm. Yeah, be the safe parent. That's a really good one, because also, so many of us, maybe there are unsafe parents around us,
Mm,
whether our own partners or, uncles, aunts, friends of friends of friends. There are, I remember when my kids were growing up, I used to look around at their friends' parents, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not sure you're going to be okay going at that house anymore,
uh-huh.
because, the the information there is, I disagree. So, we have to remember what are our things. And then when it's your story, um, and not your child's, I think it's also, and I think you mentioned that at some point, it's about trusting your gut. Uh,
100%,
Also,
yeah. Yeah.
and when there's something smells like shit, it's usually shit.
But, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I think
because,
I put a lot of value on trusting your gut. I think we are desensitized in the modern world,
mm, yeah,
um, and we talk about that lizard brain thing. But I think it's really important because also butterflies in the tummy is not a good sign. It's not
yeah,
a good sign. It's a sign. It's just a sign. It's not a good sign or a bad sign. It's a sign.
mm,
And how you interpret it is
hmm, yeah,
where you are.
mhm, mm,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, for me, it links a lot to when we feel stressed or afraid in the sorry, in the relationship, and we feel our gut saying why. I think that we should really, really believe that.
You should
And
listen to it.
because stress is we have enough of that as individuals, to not be accepting it in a relationship. And if we're moving one step further towards fear, then it's even worse.
Yeah. I think one of the things we're going to talk about later on in the series is um how how your body interprets that relationship, how you feel when the phone pings, how you
Mm,
feel when they come to the house, how and that's all part and parcel of that. And we'll talk about that in more detail
mm,
um further down in the series.
mm. And I think to be the safe parent, to go back to that, there's also not only what I say, but how I myself act in my relationships. Um, so how, kids learn by example. They learn to walk by watching their parents walk. They learn to talk by listening to us. Same way, they learn to be to create a harmonious relationship by watching us. So
Yeah.
um, I I think it might be also, if you're a parent of a teenager, a good occasion to review your own relationships and how you treat people around you and how you accept to be treated by people around you.
One of the big things that is often frequently discussed is the examples that we set to our children. Because obviously on these platforms where they say, this has been going on in my relationship, um, should I leave? And a lot of people say, well, if you don't leave, you're setting an example to your children, which you
Mm-hmm.
are. But at the same time, it's not that easy.
No, of course it's not.
It's so hard because all the steps that you have to take, not notwithstanding the whole post separation abuse,
Mm,
leaving a relationship is really hard. And that's why we're talking to teenagers now and parents now, because you don't want your kids to be ignorant and getting when I say ignorant, I mean ignorant of the facts rather than
mm-hmm,
stupid.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
You don't want your kid to be ignorant of the facts, get into a relationship with somebody and then find, well, now I feel bad because I can't leave, and now I'm setting a bad example to my kids because that's re-victimizing
No, this is
somebody.
this is double trauma. It's horrendous.
Yeah. So you
No,
do,
I
I mean,
mean,
whereas, like I said earlier, people, they leave their kid behind, they leave their kids behind because what you do is you find that survivors of abuse will do what they can do in the moment to be at the
of
safest
course.
they can be
Mm,
for men or children.
mm.
And then society jumps on them and
No,
says,
that's not what I was referencing to. I was referencing to, let's say, I'm a grown up in a rather okay relationship, not abusive. Let's, not nothing is perfect, but and I believe that I teach my kids by the way I treat other people. Do I
yeah,
treat other people with respect, or do I abuse them? Do I allow other people to abuse me in even in conversations and things like that? Do I set boundaries? This is me teaching my kids how to grow up
yeah,
and to see the red flags without naming, without talking about abuse every day in day out, because this is not
yeah,
either.
yeah, absolutely,
I don't want to
absolutely, yeah.
paralyze my kids, or but
You
it's
can tell, like,
still
if you go to the school gate any day, at 3:15 or whatever the time kids get out of school these days. And, you know, I'm talking about little kids when the
Mm.
mum or dad goes to pick them up. You can tell how a child speaks to their mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can see, you know, like what's going on in that house
Mm.
because they're just like little sponges, aren't they? They just like soak it
Mm.
all up
Mm. Mm.
and then they just regurgitate. That's what they are.
Yep.
And you can see that, but it's, you know, be respectful. Respect for me is more important than love.
Mm.
That's my
I think so
headspace.
too. I think so too. And allowing for me, one of the things was I was constantly giving my children choices, easy ones. You want apple
Yeah,
or pears?
that, so
Just
that's
choose,
yeah, yeah,
make a
yeah,
choice,
yeah.
and you
Yeah,
already
it's
have you.
empowering. But,
That was, yeah, one thing of mine was an obsession that, they had to see the choices. So obviously I was not allowing them to, this was not a cafeteria that they could choose
yeah,
anything,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I had, there's two apple sauces and pear sauce. You can choose which one, and that's all right. Uh, Things like little things. It's not about, talking about, in order to not get into a relationship with an abusive person, this is what you should do, my little girl.
Yeah.
But it's about how we live our lives also, and
And
how we accept to be treated. And again, I'm talking about women here who are not in danger themselves.
yeah,
Because when they are in danger themselves, it's save yourself first. I'm sorry, but
so, yeah.
and as you were saying, sometimes the kids are better off with the abuser for a while, so that the mother can breathe and live.
And not be murdered.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a,
and not murder the kids. Like, when we see that in
mm,
abusive people will murder the mum and the kids, or just the kids as a
mm.
punishment. Which the whole thing about family court here is horrific.
Yeah, no, this is okay. So, be the safe parent. That was our main conversation. Do we have anything that we want to add to this episode? Um, Yeah, I just maybe we end with this question because I think it's going to we need to get out of the way. Is it only men that are abusers?
No, no, women can be abusive too. Any gender can be abusive,
Mm,
but it's the majority. The majority is. I mean, the majority of relationships in the romantic sense are heterosexual anyway, aren't they?
mm,
But it's the majority of men, and because and men perpetrate violence. I think the statistic is 94% of violence is perpetrated by men. But that's 94% of violence is perpetrated by men across the board. So,
yeah.
you know, we're talking about relationships that are romantic, but and as you said earlier, the issue for me is not the violence against women and girls, although that is a problem. The actual real problem is men who are violent because they
Mm,
perpetrate violence against women and girls and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
boys and men and anybody.
yeah. 94%.
I think 94 might be a bit more actually, might be 96. It's
That's
90 something.
that's one of those figures that we need to remember, right?
Yeah,
Kind of
it's high.
um
But I mean, I've got two sons and a daughter, and I worried far more about violence being perpetrated on my son
mm,
than I did about violence being perpetrated on my daughter
mm,
because males are violent. My boys aren't violent, but
mm,
um, I did worry that they would be victims of
mm.
violence.
Yeah, me too, to be honest. Me too. Both my kids. We live in a very rural area of France. There is when my eldest son was young, he was very intelligent. He was way above average, and he was treated like a pariah. And he
Yeah.
was he was actually beat to death, not to death, but he was beaten by rugby farmer type
Mm.
people who felt men, sorry, boys who felt threatened. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, um,
yeah.
but I think I just wanted to get out of the way out of the way because we're going to be talking about violence against women, blah blah blah, domestic abuse, and I just
Hmm.
want to say, yeah, sure, it's not only men, who are the perpetrators or the abusers, but there's a huge majority. And that's
It's a
why we're
huge
going to
majority.
allow ourselves to say men. Please,
Yeah,
if you're a man and you're not violent, congratulations. Don't take it personally.
congratulations. Like,
It's like,
that's the default position. Not being a bastard is just normal.
yeah.
Like that is who you should be. You
Hmm.
don't get a medal for that either.
No, I know. But, sometimes I feel like giving medals away.
Well, not violent today, Mum. Gan on, brilliant.
Yeah. The consent thing. Are we going to discuss the consent thing in this episode or in some later one? I think we
I
should.
will do it in the later one.
Okay, yeah, I think we're done with this one. We've done
Okay.
the be a safe parent thing, which is the main
Yep.
thing. So thank
Yeah.
you so much,
Thank
everyone, for
you.
listening. Thank you, Ree, and I'll talk to you soon for episode 3, which I don't remember the title of, but we'll find it when we get there. Bye for now, everyone.